So here I'm going to be drawing this photo. I turn it to grayscale, and then I bump up the contrast to clarify the darks and the lights. The photo isn't great. It was a snapshot, so the darks and lights aren't arranged very well, and I'm going to have to modify them based on my knowledge of form and lighting. So I start off thinking about perspective, and I draw a very rough rectangle, and then I start cutting into that, adding cylinders, other rectangles, and I'm doing this on printer paper with a micron and a sharpie. This is not the final drawing. This is you need to draw on a separate piece of paper to do, for this, because you don't want this mess to show up on your final drawing. But it is very clarifying to start off by analyzing the picture before you start drawing it. So I'm looking at the legs. I'm simplifying them a lot. They have a lot of little forms in there, but I'm just simplifying out to a basic cylinder. Where's the perspective? Where does it exist in space? It's a tapered cylinder, and then you have a little cone on the end of it. Its body is a cylinder. This one, the cylinder is bent. And of course, there's a lot of details in there, but for our purposes, we just need the perspective, the basic form. Same with the back leg. We'll add in the details and the detail of how each part of the form goes later, but to start off with, you want to simplify. Okay, so now we're getting to pencil. What I'm going to do here is basically copy what I have up there. That's at the starting place. I'm doing it in a very light pencil, and that way I can erase these sketch lines very easily later. So I'm starting off with the cylinder, the head. It's a little harder to see this on camera because I'm using a very light pencil. So I'll speed this up. I've put in the horizon, basically just copy what we have there. Once we get that done, I start to go in and define some more detail in the forms. What shape is this cheek actually? There's a cylinder that gives you the eye socket, so I put in the eye there. So I go slowly, and I'm starting also to think a little more about proportions. Is the nose really that long? And I looked at the reference, and how many eyes tall is that? Estimating. It doesn't have to be exact, although the more you draw, the better you get at understanding. I look at negative space a lot. So here I started to delineate where are the forms, and I'm thinking about cylinders and cones and all these 3D shapes before I move on to the contour. And I'm thinking, when I do the contour, I'm thinking about overlapping lines. This part overlaps that part. So they outline the back leg, putting in details of forms. I'm thinking about which form is in front of the other form. Overlapping creates a sense of depth. Now I'm starting to think about the shadows. So I look at that edited photo where the shadows are very punchy, and I'm putting in where are those the darkest parts on the horse. So here I notice that the ear lines up with the cheek. So I drew out the line from the ear to get that, from the cheek up to get that ear placed properly. I'm still tweaking the proportions at this point. So then I'm thinking about forms as I draw in that back leg. I'm thinking about the 3D forms and which one's in front of the other. I started thinking about planes in the shoulder there, which surface is facing which direction, and then I went in and put in those darks. So at this point it should be separated into a dark part and a light part, and you can see I erased the sketch lines. I tried to clean up those white parts so that it's just white, and then you have the dark parts that are just black. At this point I started filling in the background a little bit to be able to see the white parts better. I was thinking still about the perspective when I was putting in the ground plane. Then I went back in with a darker pencil. This is a 10B. And I started putting in the eye, the ear, the nose, and parts where forms meet, and there creates a darker point. I started adding some tone to the light parts. You want to keep the light parts very light so that you don't mess up the value scheme. Just adding more details, adding more. Here I started adding more tone to the background. If you have a white object on a white background, it's going to blend in. So it's very important to really make that background dark. And this part probably I spent the most time on it, just editing the background and going over it again. This is a paper that has a lot of texture to it. So when you use different pencils, it actually gets into different parts of the grain. So I use HB, 6B, and 10B to make sure that I get different levels of grain in the paper to try to make it look more complete and not have those like white spaces showing through as much. Here's the sketch, the final.